Chapter 10. A Lobster Quadrille. The Mock Turtle sighed deeply and drew the back of one flapper across his eyes. He looked at Alice and tried to speak, but for a minute or two sobs choked his voice. "Same as if he had a bone in his throat," said the Griffin, and it set to work shaking him and punching him in the back. At last the Mock Turtle recovered its voice, and with tears running down his cheeks, he went on again. "You may not have lived much under the sea." "I haven't," said Alice. "And perhaps you were never even introduced to a lobster." Alice began to say, "I once tasted," but stopped herself and said, "No, never. So you can have no idea what a delightful thing a lobster quadrille is." "No, indeed," said Alice. "What sort of a dance is it?" "Why, you first form into a line along the seashore." "Two lines?" cried the Mock Turtle. "Seals, turtles, salmon and so on. Then, when you've cleared all the jellyfish out of the way—" "That generally takes some time," interrupted the Griffin. "You advance twice, each with a lobster as a partner." "Of course," the Mock Turtle said. "Advance twice, set partners, change lobsters, and retire in the same way," continued the Griffin. "Then, you know," the Mock Turtle went on, "you throw the lobsters," shouted the Griffin with a bound into the air, "as far out to sea as you can." "Swim after them," screamed the Griffin. "Turn a somersault in the sea," cried the Mock Turtle, capering wildly about. "Change lobsters again," yelled the Griffin at the top of its voice. "Back to land again." "And that's all the first figure," said the Mock Turtle, suddenly dropping his voice, and the two creatures, who had been jumping about like mad things all this time, sat down again very sadly and quietly and looked at Alice. "It must be a very pretty dance," said Alice timidly. "Would you like to see a little of it?" said the Mock Turtle. "Very much indeed," said Alice. "Come, let's try the first figure," said the Mock Turtle to the Griffin. "We can do it without lobsters, you know. Which shall sing?" "Oh, you sing," said the Griffin. "I've forgotten the words." So they began solemnly dancing round and round Alice, every now and then treading on her toes as they passed too close, and waving their forepaws to mark the time, while the Mock Turtle sang this, very slowly and sadly. "Will you walk a little faster?" said a whiting to a snail. "There's a porpoise just behind us, and he's treading on my tail. See how eagerly the lobsters and the turtles all advance. They are waiting on the shingle. Will you come and join the dance? Will you, won't you? Will you, won't you? Will you join the dance? Will you, won't you? Will you, won't you? Won't you join the dance?" You can really have no notion how delightful it will be when they take us up and throw us with the lobsters out to sea. But the snail replied, "Too far, too far," and gave a look askance. Said he thanked the whiting kindly, but he would not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not, could not, would not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not, could not join the dance. "What matters is how far we go," his scaly friend replied. "There is another shore, you know, upon the other side. The further off from England, the nearer is to France. Then turn not pale, beloved snail, but come and join the dance. Will you, won't you? Will you, won't you? Will you join the dance? Will you, won't you? Will you, won't you? Won't you join the dance?" "Thank you," said Alice. That's a very interesting dance to watch, feeling very glad that it was over at last. And I do so like that curious song about the whiting. Oh, as to the whiting, said the Mock Turtle, you've seen them, of course. Well, yes, I've often seen them at dinner. But she stopped herself from saying any more. I don't know what dinner may be, but if you've seen them so often, of course, you know what they're like. I believe so, said Alice thoughtfully. They have their tails in their mouths, and they're covered all over in crumbs. You're wrong about the crumbs, said the Mock Turtle. Crumbs would wash all off in the sea. But they do have their tails in their mouths, and the reason is... Here the Mock Turtle shut his eyes and yawned. Tell her the reason for all that, he said to the Griffin. The reason is, said the Griffin, that they would go with the lobsters to the dance. So they got thrown out to sea. So they had to fall a long way. So they got their tails fast in their mouths, so they couldn't get them out again. That's all. Thank you, said Alice. It's very interesting. I never knew so much about a whiting before. I can tell you more than that if you like, said the Griffin. Do you know why it's called a whiting? I've never thought about it. Why? It does the boots and shoes, the Griffin replied very solemnly. Alice was thoroughly puzzled. Does the boots and shoes? Why? What are your boots and shoes done with? I mean, what makes them so shiny? Alice looked down at them and thought for a minute and said, They're done with boot blacking, I believe. Boots and shoes under the sea, said the Griffin, are done with whiting. Now you know. And what are they made of? Alice asked. Soles and eels, of course. Any shrimp could have told you that. If I'd been the whiting, said Alice, whose thoughts were still running along the song, I'd have said to the porpoise, Keep back, please. We don't want you with us. They were obliged to have him with them, the Mock Turtle said. No wise fish would go anywhere without a porpoise. Wouldn't it really? Of course not. Why, if a fish came to me and told me he was going on a journey, I should say, with what porpoise? Don't you mean purpose? Said Alice. I mean what I say. Come, let's hear of your adventures, said the Griffin. I could tell you my adventures, beginning from this morning, said Alice, but it's no use going back to yesterday, because I was a different person then. Explain all that, said the Mock Turtle. No, the adventures first, said the Griffin. Explanations take such a long time. So Alice began telling them her adventures from the time when she first saw the White Rabbit. She was a little nervous about it just at first. The two creatures got so close to her, one on each side, and opened their eyes and mouths so very wide. But she gained courage as she went on. Her listeners were perfectly quiet till she got to the part about her repeating, You are old, Father William, to the caterpillar, and the words all coming different. And then the Mock Turtle drew a long breath and said, That's very curious. It's all about as curious as can be, said the Griffin. It all came different. I should like to hear her try and repeat something now. Tell her to begin. He looked at the Griffin as if he thought it had some kind of authority over Alice. Stand up and repeat. 'Tis the voice of the sluggard, said the Griffin. How the creatures order one about and make one repeat lessons, thought Alice. I might just as well be at school. However, she got up and began to repeat it, but her head was so full of the lobster quadrille that she hardly knew what she was saying, and the words came out very strangely indeed. 'Tis the voice of the lobster, I heard him declare. You have baked me too brown, I must sugar my hair. As the duck with its eyelids, so he with his nose trims his belt and his buttons and turns out his toes. When the sands are all dry, he is gay as a lark, and will walk into contemptuous tones of the shark. And when the tide rises and sharks are around, his voice has a timid and tremulous sound. That's different from what I used to say when I was a child, said the Gryphon. Well, I never heard it before, said the Mock Turtle, but it sounds absolute nonsense. Alice said nothing. She had sat down with her face in her hands, wondering if anything would ever happen in the normal way again. I should like to have it explained, said the Mock Turtle. She can't explain it. Go on with the next verse. What about his toes? How could he turn them out with his nose, you know? It's the first position in dancing, Alice said. But she was terribly puzzled by the whole thing, really wanted to change the subject. Go on with the next verse. It begins, I passed by his garden. Alice did not dare to disobey, though she felt it would all come wrong, and she went on in a trembling voice. I passed by his garden and marked with one eye how the owl and the panther were sharing a pie. The panther took pie crust and gravy and meat, while the owl had the dish as its share of the treat. When the pie was all finished, the owl, as a boon, was kindly permitted to pocket the spoon, while the panther received knife and fork with a growl, and concluded the banquet by... What is the point of repeating all that stuff? The Mock Turtle interrupted. If you don't explain it as you go, it's by far the most confusing thing I've ever heard. Yes, I think you'd better leave off, said the Gryphon, and Alice was only glad to do so. Shall we try another figure of the lobster quadrille? Or would you like the Mock Turtle to sing you another song? Oh, a song, please, if the Mock Turtle will be so kind. No accounting for tastes. Sing her turtle soup, will you, old fellow? The Mock Turtle sighed deeply and began, in a voice choked with sobs, to sing this. Beautiful soup, so rich and green, waiting in a hot tureen. Who for the dainties would not stoop? Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Who cares for fish, game, or any other dish? Who will not give all else for 2 pennyworth only of beautiful soup? Again, again, cried the Gryphon, and the Mock Turtle had just begun to repeat it when a cry of "The trial's beginning" was heard in the distance. Come on, said the Gryphon, and taking Alice by the hand, it hurried off without waiting for the end of the song. What trial is it? Alice panted as she ran. But the Gryphon only answered, Come on, and ran the faster, while more and more faintly came, Beautiful soup, beautiful soup. And that is the end of chapter 10. Chapter 11 is called Who Stole the Tarts? Have a lovely evening.